Hello everyone. So, um, I was out today. I don't have internet at my house, so I have to go out to get online. I have to go to a library, and because of COVID, I have to sit in my car out in the parking lot, which is fine. I'm not griping. It's just, it does create certain um, difficulties. But, um, but I do get to see more of what happens on the outside of the library. Not that that's something that I would really choose under other circumstances. But so I was sitting there today, and um, there was a guy there, a homeless guy, um, and he was talking to himself. This is fairly common, at least with some of the homeless people or houseless people I've encountered. Um, and uh, and you, I wanted to help him, but I'm not really in a position to do so. I couldn't offer him. I have nothing to offer him. So um, it was not pleasant seeing him have that kind of a. I'm trying to put this gently. Seeing him have that kind of a mental state. It's there's You always want to help, or at least I do. Well, people like me do. There are people whom um, actively go out and try to hurt homeless people. Every time they see a homeless person, they call the police on them. It's like, no, don't do that. The police are not equipped mentally, emotionally, in terms of their base of knowledge, in terms of their training. They are not equipped to deal with people whom have mental illness. They simply aren't. Look at how they dress, for Christ's sake. They've got like 15 guns on them. They always run around with body armor on, and a lot of them are assholes, you know. And that's where the whole defund the police thing comes in. And I'll explain more about that later. Defund the police specifically. Okay, so he was sitting there. Um, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to him just because I was doing my own thing. And I always write out what I want to do beforehand. I have certain goals that I need to achieve when I'm online, and so I'm going through the checklist. And I'm sitting there, and then I notice a couple of cops walk up to him. And of course, they always travel in numbers, like sand people. They can never, they're always too chicken shit to do it alone. Not always. I've seen the occasional cop on their own, make contact with people. Yeah, they always show up in force, and it's like, why, you know? Um, but there are reasons why, but we won't get into that now. Someone had called the police on, and I usually keep my windows up just because I don't like to have to wear a mask all the time when I'm in the car. When it's warmer out, I put my mask on and roll the windows down, and stuff like that. But it's still pretty cold here, so but I rolled the window down just to listen. That's why there's no video here. I didn't. My phone takes terrible videos, and um, but I monitored the situation, let's say, to see what the approach was and to see how the interaction went and that kind of thing. So I'm sitting there, and the cops kind of immediately have a flippant attitude with the guy. Again, they always, if there's a wrong tack to take with someone, you can bet 99% of the time the fucking cop will choose the absolute worst approach in dealing with someone, because the cops don't have to care. That's the culture that has been built up around the police. They're basically, with qualified immunity, they are exempt from they're exempt from accountability, and they know that, and they run around with guns, so they figure they can say and do whatever the hell they want, regardless of our rights. But you know, they were a little douchey, as most cops are, and the power trip thing, you know, and they told the guy that he had to leave or get arrested. And he was eating something at that point, and I'm glad he had access to food, at the very least. And they at one point stated that he had urinated on one of the walls there. It was a public space. It was a kind of a big complex, you know, parking lot complex thing, and someone had observed him urinating, and I guess had called the police. He had been there for, he'd just been kind of sitting there, hour and a half, 2 hours, and the police said, well, excuse me, they said, well, if you, the guy was, he was not happy about being asked to, well, not being asked, being told to leave or he'd get arrested. And that's why you don't frame it like that. You know, you explain the situation, you don't threaten them right out of the gate, because then they're going to immediately get defensive and you're just going to escalate the situation, which cops, again, they do that because they don't have to do it any other way. They're not legally held accountable when they do things the wrong way and when things invariably go bad. So the guy was already pissed off, and they said, you know, someone observed you doing this, and, you know, if you hadn't done it, you would be okay. You know, it was just the public urination thing that they had a problem with. And he became more irate. They became more flippant, more aggressive. They kept threatening to arrest him, you know, and which just kept escalating the situation. That's why you don't call the police on someone who has a parent. You know, I couldn't prove it, but he was having a conversation with, seemingly with himself. And I'm not a doctor, you know, I don't claim to, you know, but just from my own unqualified observations. And it's like, okay, let's say you're trying to hammer a nail, you know, and it's a small, thin nail. You're just, it wouldn't take much to put it into the board or whatever. So, do you use a small hammer, or do you use a sledgehammer for this little tiny nail? That's what it's like when you call the cops on someone, because the cops are a sledgehammer. They're not a precision tool or instrument or implement. They are just dumb, bludgeon you over the head thugs. And if you want to guarantee to make a situation worse, you call the police. It shouldn't be that way. But if the police were held accountable, it wouldn't be that way. If the police weren't over-militarized, things wouldn't be this bad. But we've allowed this to happen. I say we. Our elected officials have allowed this to happen. There's not a whole hell of a lot that you and I can fucking do about it. Except, observe and report all of their activities. If they're not going to wear body cams, I've had this conversation with the local police department. Hey, you need to get your cops body cams because that has there's a degree of, at the very least, public accountability there. And he came up with all kinds of reasons why they couldn't. It's like, well, you can afford new cars every couple of years. You can afford all this body armor and all this militarized stuff. You can't afford a fucking body camera for, what, 20 cops? Come on. It's just bullshit. They don't want to be held accountable. And they just kept threatening him with arrest, and he took his food and he destroyed it. He was frustrated at the situation. And things escalated. They kept threatening, they said, okay, you're going to be under arrest because you won't leave, and so he busted out the N-word. It was a female cop that was talking to him, and he kept calling her an N-word. And he kept saying that he's not an N-word, so he shouldn't have to move, and he said that, yeah. I certainly don't support the guy's racist statements. And what's funny is the first time he busted out the N-word, cops are like, hey, nobody said that. Nobody said that. It's like relax. Clown college. You're safe. It's the other guy saying it, not you. They knew that they were being observed because they looked right at me while I was sitting there watching them. And yeah. So I can't condone the things that he said. Now, there are certain things to have to explain here, because I know that this story will likely, some people will become irrational and they'll start, how dare you criticize the police, and it's like, fuck off, nobody likes a fucking ass kisser, just, if you love cops, just shut the fuck up and keep driving around in that stupid car of yours with the fucking thin blue line flag on it, okay, which, is just stupid. The whole culture is stupid, but anyway. So, let's talk about the situation. Well, what did he do? Well, he urinated in public. That's not okay. It is a violation of the law. And now, I understand how difficult it is, especially in the pandemic, to find a restroom. It's a pain in the ass to have to go and walk, but imagine if we all just went to the bathroom outside in public areas instead of having a sewer system. Yeah, disease would be rampant, and we'd have all kinds of problems because we've been there before. We've at the very least learned that very basic lesson. Okay. And we all need to be held to that same standard. So they could have arrested him for that alone. So on the one hand, I appreciate that they just asked him to leave. That was their first, kind of the, first thing they said, they gave him the option of leaving rather than just saying you're under arrest. I don't think there are any cameras around, and the cops didn't observe him urinating. But when they brought it up to him, he didn't deny it either. Which is a distinction that, could be made. So, right off the bat there, he was wrong. I had to go to the bathroom, and I walked to a business that had an open bathroom, and I used their bathroom. Sometimes I might drive to one. So he was at fault. He shouldn't have done that. The cops, their approach should have been different. They shouldn't have been so flippant. They shouldn't have gotten so aggressive so quickly. And there was no need to have two of them, because the psychology of it, they understand what they're doing. They're doing it specifically to intimidate people. They'll claim it's under the auspices of, backup, they're protecting themselves, but they have all of these guns and all of this shit. That's not enough protection? I mean, come on. And they have the entirety of the legal system behind them. They could have executed that guy summarily in the street and they never would have gone to jail. How many of us could claim the same thing? We'd be under arrest like that because they have a hard-on for arresting people. They kept saying, well, it's just lucky that it's, that we're busy. And it's like, well, you were taking your time with him. You had no problem putting him under arrest, which takes time, paperwork, all that stuff, processing. How busy could they have been? It's not that big of a town, Anyway. Yeah, the whole thing was, it was stupid. So, when I say defund the police, so what do I mean by that? Well, the right has, of course, gotten all hyperbolic and said, they said defund the police, so that must mean, do away with the police. No, that's not what it fucking means. Police departments are overfunded. Their funding is bloated in the same way that the military's funding is bloated. I mean, to an insane degree. Like, to a ridiculous fucking degree. So, yeah. So, what's happened is that the police have become a catch-all. Every single problem under any category, you just call the police, because they're the only game in town. There's no one else whom you can call. You can't, when you call 911, which is kind of a generalized thing, it's meant to be centralized so that, there's coordination. When you call 911 and you say someone's having a mental health crisis, guys with guns show up. That's not the right approach. So when people say defund the police, it means literally take funding from the police, whose budgets are bloated anyway, and give it to, redirect it to mental health people. Creating a separate team. A team to deal with situations that are, are more social in nature rather than criminal. That way you can get these people, if they're suffering from a mental health crisis, you can get them some kind of help. See, because what do the police do when they show up? We're going to put you under arrest. That's it. That is the absolute beginning and ending of their tactics. Well, that and just shooting people, right? So that doesn't help anybody. It burdens the system, overburdens it to an insane degree. Someone, if they're having a mental health crisis, and you abuse them in that way, you arrest them, they feel like they feel victimized, because in a lot of cases they are. They're disrespected. The processing through jail and all this other stuff is very. It's stripping someone of the respect that they should be due. That's only going to exacerbate people's negative health state. So the police just going to someone whom is having a mental health crisis and arresting them does not help the person at all. It does more damage. And since there's no one else to go to when someone is in pain, I mean, it's like, okay, when someone has gotten injured seriously, you call 911, you say, so I need an ambulance because da 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 da. Police, of course, always show up because they're like, they're like the flies at the picnic. They're always there, They always have to fucking show up. They smell blood in the water, or food in the garbage can. And it's kind of like raccoons, too. But anyway, so it's like, okay, someone, they get one of their fingers chopped off. They need real medical attention. Well, imagine if there was no EMTs, there were no ambulances or anything else. It was just the cops. How would a cop deal with someone's finger getting cut off? Well, you probably shouldn't have done whatever you did to make your finger get cut off, huh? Hey, do you have an ID? What's your name? Where you live? This person's bleeding out. That's what cops do. That's what they are. They're like Mr. Potato Head. They have an outside layer of skin, and they presumably have some kind of skull, although I'm sure it's quite soft or thick. You kind of have just those two extremes. But there's nothing else inside there. They're not trained. They are incapable of handling any situation that is thrown at them. And so what does the government do? Gives them literally every single situation to deal with. You don't use the sledgehammer. Use the little, hammer. The police do need to be defunded. And that does not mean abolishment. Take the term, the phrase, and its most literal meaning, because that's what it means. We take money from them and put it towards something useful, like having a mental health organization that when someone is having a mental health crisis, these people can show up. They don't need to have guns. The guys with the guns generally tend to make situations worse because they are just itching to use them. because they view us the same way that you view those non-player characters in video games. You know? So, yeah. I'm glad that people on the left are starting to push for some kind of reform, and that they put forth the idea of redirecting money from the police to, you know, mental health crisis response. Because, you know, you don't send the fucking SWAT team to put out a fire. Send firemen. Fire people. Fire persons. It's pretty fucking simple. If anyone in government had a fucking brain, they would have done it already. But, you know, the guys in government are there because they just want to make money. They don't give a fuck about representing you or I, and certainly not representing us honestly. They will do anything and everything to cover their asses. And guess who investigates the police? Other police officers. Gee. Do you think that the cops are going to hold themselves accountable? No. We see so fucking often that they just don't. It's not a few fucking bad apples. It's the whole goddamn bunch. And what happens when you have one rotten apple in an enclosed space with a bunch of other apples and fruit and food products? Those food products also become contaminated and begin to rot. Even if you just have a few bad apples, they always rot the ones around them. So, yeah, I finally talked about it. This is something that I thought about doing a long time ago, but I didn't. And so this situation prompted me to do that. Yeah. So we need real reform. And I don't think that any of our politicians are really, outside of, you know, perhaps the so-called squad, I don't think any of them are really willing or prepared to do anything for realsies, because they don't care. They're in government to get paid, not to help people. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody.